On September 12, 2023, Mexican journalist Jaime Maussan presented the following: 2 mummified remains in the building of the Mexican Congrass. These bodies are humanoid, but clearly non-human, and they look exactly like the so-called little grey aliens often seen during UFO abductions. The case became a global sensation and was reported by the mainstream media almost everywhere in the world, which is rare when it comes to this topic. Based on the reactions I encountered online, it seems to me that most people doubt the authenticity of the bodies, even in UFO circles. However, after looking into the subject, I dare to declare that these are real corpses belonging to non-human beings. And yes, I know that if you search the internet about the topic, the first articles and videos that come up will state that these are simply dolls. But those articles and videos talk about something different. We will get to that later. I also know that in the pictures the mummies look more like puppets than organic corpses, but in those places where the thick layer of this white dust covering them has come off, they actually look like biological beings. For comparison, this is what a human mummy looks like. Now let's go back to the beginning of this story. Towards the end of 2015, somewhere in Peru between the village of Palpa and the small town of Naga, which is famous for its huge ancient geoglyphs which are only visible from the air, a Huaqeero, which is a kind of illegal treasure hunter and grave robber named Leandro Benedicto Rivera Sarmiento, and his team discovered several mummified bodies and body parts of humanoid but not exactly human beings in a cave in the desert. According to conflicting information, these bodies were not found in the cave, but in an underground necropolis. But we will talk about that later. When the story was still in its early stage, Sarmiento went by the pseudonym Mario in the media, so I will refer to him as such for the rest of the video. The Huaqeeros in Peru usually try to get their hands on archaeological relics from the Inca Empire, which they then sell on the black market. Mario had been in the business for over 20 years when he found the mummies. He claimed that over the decades he had made some very serious connections trading in these artifacts. Mario sold 3 less significant finds, specifically a mummified hand with 3 fingers, a small non-human head, and a mummy of a small humanoid creature to his UFO enthusiast friend named Paul Ronceros. Ronceros wanted the discovery to hit the news, but the local press didn't take him seriously, which is perhaps understandable considering that he poses on his YouTube channel like this. So in the fall of 2016, he contacted the Inscari Institute in Peru and its president, Terry Jaime. Jaime himself is a French explorer living in Peru who primarily researches the archaeological sites of the Incas beyond the Andes in the Amazonian rainforest. Back in 1975, a satellite managed to capture a few pyramid-like structures deep in the Peruvian jungle. It was impossible to tell from the footage whether they were real pyramids or not. So in the following decades, several people tried to reach the site. Some died trying, some turned back, but no one succeeded until 2005, when Terry Jaime, after many attempts, reached the alleged pyramids, where he discovered that they were just mountains. Nevertheless, he became somewhat famous due to the success of the expedition. The reason I mention this is so that you know he is not the type of guy who talks about things from the comfort of his armchair without looking into it. After Jaime and his team looked at the remains in Ronceros's possession several times, they decided that it might be worth investigating the case. So they arranged for a doctor in Cusco, namely Dr. Edson Salazar Vivanaco, to x-ray the mummified head in Ronceros's possession. You can see the X-ray image on the screen. It clearly shows a skull with no signs of fractures, cuts, or anything that would indicate that it has been artificially assembled. And they also found nothing on the skin covering the head that would indicate it had been subsequently crafted onto the skull, which is why Dr. Salazar and Jaime and his team concluded that the head was real. So, they devoted the next few years to the subject. It was around this time that the first materials about the Peruvian alien mummies were posted online, partly thanks to the Iskari Institute, who launched a website called The Alien Project, where they would document the progress of their research. Jaime and his team, although with some difficulties, managed to contact Mario in the January of 2017, who had been following their online presence for months at that point and knew who they were. Mario was willing to temporarily hand over some of the mummies and body parts he had in his possession for examination purposes in the following months. The first body that was handed over for examination was the mummy of this less than 40 centimeters creature, which did not get a proper name. The mummy was X-rayed. You can see the results on the screen right now. Unfortunately, I only found this image tilted like this. In any case, you can see a skeleton that differs significantly in many places from any known living creature, including the previously X-rayed mummified head. First of all, its hands and feet consist of 4 roughly identical rod-shaped bones placed one behind the other, but there are no joints where the bones meet like us humans have. Moreover, the creature's spine looks very similar to its limbs, and the cervical vertebrae ends inside the skull. I would like to note here that there are reptiles that have an extendable neck, such as turtles. Later, there will be more signs that some of these species may belong to the family of reptiles. Due to the structure of the limbs and the spine, Jaime and his team wondered if they had been put together artificially, but they found nothing on the creature's skin that would indicate manipulation. Furthermore, the structure of the skeleton is almost completely symmetrical, which would be very difficult to fake if it were made by hand. The whole thing reminded me when, in the late 1700s, the first platypus carcasses were sent from Australia to England, and scientists of the time were given the opportunity to examine them. Many of them said that they had been put together from the bodies of several different animals as a joke, even though there was no fraud behind it. They had simply come across something that was unknown to academic science at that point. On the front and back of the mummy's left hand, a double disc-shaped metal implant is visible, and we will see later this is fairly common with these bodies. In the next 2 months, Mario provided the Iskari Institute with 2 more mummified heads, similar to the one he sold to Paul Ronceros earlier. For the rest of the video, I will call the representatives of this species Small-trydactils. Tridactyl, by the way, means 3-fingered. In addition to the heads, they received 3 more mummified hands with 3 long fingers, which were also similar to the hand that Ronceros had shown them earlier. I will call the representatives of this species large tridactyls from now on. On top of these, Mario also provided the Iskari Institute with a complete small tridactyl mummy, which the Institute's staff named Albert. The remains were X-rayed by Dr. Edson. Let's start with Albert's X-ray, which you can see on the screen now. Based on this, it seems that Albert suffered from some kind of bone disease. His spine is crooked and his right leg is shorter than his left, as a result of which Albert was lame. On the right side of Albert's hip, near the thigh bone, there is a circular metal implant, which probably had medical functions. With this, the doctors of the species probably treated Albert's lameness. The interesting part is that Albert's spine is crooked exactly as it should have been due to the short legs, which indicates a natural deformation. Let's move on to the hands. You can see the X-rays on the screen right now. Each hand has 3 fingers, each finger 5 phalanges, and the hand itself consists of a total of 26 bones. The hands are about 40 centimeters long, the tendons are clearly visible at the wrists, and a circular gold or copper-coloured implant with a scaly pattern is visible at the top of all 3 hands. At the ends of the fingers, nails similar to those of humans are visible, but their beds cover 80% of the last knuckle, while in humans this is only 50%. The large tridactyl hand in the possession of Paul Ronceros was also X-rayed. It is not clear to me whether this was done by the Inscari Institute, but the X-ray is available online, which you can now see on the screen right now. This shows that the owner of the hand suffered some kind of accident, because we can see multiple fractures and splinters on the bones. And we can also see signs of some kind of medical intervention, by which I am referring to these 2 ring-shaped implants. Since the bones are not healed, I assume that whatever caused the fractures also caused the owner's death, unless of course they are capable of regenerating lost limbs. The Institute took the biological material to a few local doctors who, after examining them on camera, concluded that they were real. They also took samples from one of the hands and from the inside of one of the mummified heads for further tests. Here you can see the internal tissues of the hand. Its texture indicates that it's organic in origin. This is where the story was back in April 2017, when the aforementioned Mexican journalist Jaime Maussan contacted Terry Jamin and told him that they, together with a crew from Gaia, would like to go to Peru to make a documentary about the mummies and to join in with the research. In case you don't know, Gaia is like Netflix but for New Age people. The Gaia crew arrived in Peru on April 23rd, and it included Jaime Maussan, Dr. Jose Jesus Zalci Benitez, a high-ranking medical officer of the Mexican Navy, Dr. Jose de la Cruz Rios Lopez, a Mexican biologist, and Dr. Konstantin G. Korotkov, a professor from the St. Petersburg University. Korotkov later wrote a book about his experiences, which was published in 2019 under the title Mysterious Mummies of Nazca, Eyewitness Testimony. While the crew was filming in Peru together with the Inscari Institute, they had the opportunity to examine the mummy of a human-like baby which was a few months old, 5 complete small-trydactyl mummies, of which Albert was mentioned earlier, the mummy of 1 headless small-tridactyl, unlike the others, he was in a sitting position, 2 small-tridactyl heads, 3 large tridactyl hands. These are the ones Mario previously gave to the Inscari Institute. And last, but not least, the mummy of a human-sized and human-like 3-fingered creature, which was later named Maria after its discoverer. Konstantin writes the following in his book about his first encounter with Maria. I quote, "The figure was sitting in a fetal position, with its arms folded around itself, its knees bent. It seemed that it assumed this position after its death. The 2 Mexican and Peruvian experts and I were given the opportunity to examine the humanoid closely. The method of mummification was fundamentally different from anything we had ever seen before. The tissues were dried out and well preserved in the dry climate. The entire body was covered in this white powder. It was impossible to determine the sex. All tissues were rigid, although the hand was slightly movable. There were no signs of decomposition, and the mummy was in excellent condition. The humanoid head was raised, looking forward, upward. There were 3 long fingers on the hands and feet, 4 phalanges on each. My impression was that there were no nails, although this was difficult to determine with certainty. The skeleton, as well as the imprint of the soft parts, were clearly visible. The back was arched, with protruding vertebrae. I counted 25, plus or minus 2 vertebrae. The ribs were prominent. The legs and arms had 2 bones, as in humans, with rounded joints. A partially missing sacrum was visible in the lower back. The skull was elongated, This is a tradition characteristic of many South American cultures, and is also seen in some Egyptian statues. The nose and ears do not protrude from the head, but are marked by holes. The mouth was small, closed, and the lips were not defined. The eye sockets were clearly visible. Their diameter was about 4.5 centimeters. The left eye was convex, with a horizontal slit. The right eye was in a depression. The body gave the impression of an adult humanoid. End of quote. In the following months, the team examined the mummies more closely. We are talking about X-rays, radiocarbon dating, DNA tests, and even computer topography scans. For those unfamiliar with computer topography, these are medical machines which make 3D scans of the entire body. During the examination, it was discovered that the thick layer of dust covering the mummies was diatomaceous earth, a powdered form of sedimentary rock that is quite common on the Peruvian coastline. This material has a very good dehydrating effect, which gives it disinfecting, insecticidal and fungicidal qualities, making it excellent for preserving corpses. It was also discovered that the skin of the mummies had been coated with cadmium chloride, presumably to bind the diatomaceous earth to the body. Cadmium chloride is a compound that does not occur in nature, and its production requires very serious chemical knowledge. We humans only managed to produce cadmium chloride for the first time in the 19th century, but these mummies are much older than that. Anyway, let's look at the results of the aforementioned tests. Let's start with those of Maria. On the screen you can see her X-rays. Maria has a skeleton very similar to that of humans, although there are some differences. The biggest is, of course, at the hands and feet, because each of her limbs has 3 long fingers at the end, instead of 5, and also the skull, which is proportionally much larger than that of Homo sapiens. Mary's hands are different from the species I previously called large tridactyl. When the first materials about Maria became available on the internet in 2017, skeptics argued that the corpse is a result of forgery, that local grave robbers found an Inca mummy with an elongated skull. They distorted her facial features, cut off 2 fingers from her hands and feet, somehow lengthened the remaining 3, and then covered the surface of the entire mummy with this light-coloured powder to cover their tracks. Artificial cranial deformation was a common practice in many places in the past. This was achieved by bandaging the heads of newborns in specific places, which causes the skull to develop in an unnatural direction. However, cranial deformation does not increase the volume of the brain cavity. Despite this, Maria has a brain volume that is 1/5 larger than that of a human female for her size, meaning that the shape of her skull is probably not the result of artificial interference. Maria's skull differs in other ways as well as from that of a normal human. The wall of her skull is thicker, her eye sockets are larger, and the bones in her ear canal are different from ours as well. It also appears that Maria had no ears, only 2 holes on the side of her head. As for the hands and feet, what you can see now are Maria's topography scans. There is nothing on the scans that would indicate that fingers were cut off on her feet or hands, or that they were manipulated in any way. In fact, not only are the structures of her hands and feet different from humans, but the wrists and ankles are also different, meaning that if the mummy had been altered, the hands and feet would have had to be attached to the forearms and lower legs, but no one who examined the mummy found anything that would indicate this. Also, I think the topography scans speak for itself. For example, you can see this protruding piece of skin here. This is definitely the remains of a female breast. So Mary was female, and her species is mammalian in nature. There is also some brain residue visible here in the skull cavity. Nothing was found on the mummy that would indicate the presence of fur or hair. Due to the examinations, the diatomaceous earth covering Maria in some places wore away so much that the skin became visible. For example, here at the ends of the toes. If we look at the two right ones, we can clearly make out the creature's fingerprints. Apart from humans, only primates and koala bears have fingerprints, but in all species they are arranged in a spiral shape at the tip of the finger. However, the pattern of Maria's fingerprint is horizontally striped, which is unprecedented. They sent the samples from Maria to 2 labs for carbon dating, based on the results she probably died sometime between 1800 and 1720 years ago. Just a side note, but carbon dating is not an infallible thing. In any case, it means those who buried her almost 2 millennia ago had access to a level of chemical knowledge that we humans have only acquired in the last 2 centuries. Additional samples were also sent to university labs in Mexico City and St. Petersburg for DNA analysis. The results of the Mexican Biotechmol University shows that 33.7% of the DNA sequences extracted from the samples taken from Maria were human DNA. 18.5% belonged to bacteria, while the remaining 48% was unknown to science. The tests done at St. Petersburg University show that 23.8% of the DNA sequences were human DNA. The rest are from bacteria or of unknown origin. I don't know enough about DNA to offer any meaningful commentary, but I would like to note that this DNA was extracted from a mummy that is probably over 1700 years old, which I think could affect the result. During the examination, they managed to identify the probable cause of Maria's death because they found bite marks on her lower back with some missing tissue and bone. You can see this injury in this image. The bite was probably caused by some sort of big cat. Due to the location, we can assume that the culprit was likely a jaguar. It is not entirely clear how Maria walked with these legs. I have heard 2 theories. The first is that she stood on the tips of her toes and walked like that. The second is that she pressed the tips of her toes into the ground and supported herself on her heels, arching her feet. For the remainder of the video, I will call her species medium tridactyl. Let's move forward to the results of the aforementioned baby, which was named Wawita. Wawita was 7 or 8 months old at the time of her death. Her skeleton is almost identical to that of a modern human. The only difference is that her skull is proportionally about a quarter larger than normal, and, like Mary, her eye sockets are also slightly bigger. It is true that Wawita also has 3 fingers on her hands and feet, but there's a visible cut on them, meaning her fingers were cut off. This probably happened shortly before or after her death, because when the Hungary Institute and the Gaia team examined the mummy, it was so fragile that if the cut were to have happened recently, it would probably destroy or at least heavily damage the corpse. Wawita probably had a painful death. Her head was almost completely cut off, and she was stabbed several times in the chest. It is likely that she was used as human sacrifice. These things were widespread among South American Indians before the Europeans arrived there. The Incas, for example, specifically preferred children for ritual human sacrifices. Of course, the question arises, if Wawita was sacrificed, why did they modify her hands and feet for it to look like that of a tridactyls? Carbon dating places Wawita's death between 800 and 1000 years ago, and according to a DNA test conducted at the University of St. Petersburg, 25% of the extracted DNA sequences are from Homo sapiens. Is it possible that Wawita was a hybrid between humans and medium tridactyls? Maybe her fingers were cut off before and after death because she did not have the desired characteristics. I would also like to note that, unlike Mary, Wawita has hair that may have been red or brown. Before we continue with the results of the Small-trydactils, I would like to talk about the so-called Paracas skulls. Many artificially deformed skulls have been unearthed in Peru and South America. For example, the Peruvian archaeologist Julio César Tello Rojas, who lived there in the first half of the 20th century, did a lot for the excavation of the Paracas culture, which was an ancient South American culture in the area of the present-day city of Paracas. As a result of his excavations, he acquired a collection of many skulls, including several elongated ones, most of which can be found in Peruvian museums today. As far as I know, the researcher and YouTuber Brian Forster was the first to claim that some of the elongated skulls exhibited in Peruvian museums do not show signs of artificial cranial deformation, and that these skulls have a larger volume than normal. Some skulls have extra holes in the back for blood vessels. The size of the eye sockets is also larger than usual, and in some skulls, anomalies can be detected in regarding the cranial sutures. Sounds familiar? For comparison, here is a picture of a Paracas skull which was artificially deformed, and one that some believe naturally has this shape. The skull believed to be natural has a much taller forehead, and also has a steeper slope, and its brain volume also appears to be larger. The hole at the base of the skull where the spinal cord meets the brain is much further back than in the artificially deformed skull. Here is another example from a Peruvian museum. In the foreground you can see an elongated skull that some believe to be natural, and behind it is an artificially deformed one. The difference is clear. Brian requested permission from the Peruvian Ministry of Culture to take samples from some of the skulls for DNA testing, which he eventually got. They took samples from 18 skulls and were able to successfully extract the DNA from 13 of them. Several of the DNA samples recovered belonged to haplotypes U and H, which are mainly found in Europe and the Middle East. The interesting part is that, according to our current knowledge, before the arrival of Europeans, American Indians only had the haplotypes A, B, C, D, and X. In addition to the haplotypes, the fact that many of these skulls still have hair on them, which appears to be red in colour, also suggests that these large-headed people came to America from the Eurasian continent. Brian Forster thinks that this human race with the large head once migrated from the Crimean Peninsula to the Middle East and then sailed to the Paracas region in South America, because the largest elongated skulls aside from the Paracas region were found on the Crimean Peninsula and the Black Sea coastal area. A side note, the Paracas Peninsula is one of the best natural harbours in the entire Andean region. Elongated skulls have been found in many other places, but one of the hotspots of these remains is in the Carpathian Basin in present-day Hungary. Take for example this article from Live Science with the title "Deformed Alien Skulls Offer Clues About Life During the Roman Empire's Collapse." The article writes about an excavation where dozens of elongated skulls have been found near the settlement of Maussan in Tolna, and this is not the only site in the area. The Natural Science Museum in Budapest stores and occasionally exhibits several elongated skulls. The one you see on the screen right now is also in there. It is possible that the shape of this skull is not the result of artificial deformation. I think this is primarily due to the presence of the so-called Inca bone, which is visible on the back of the skull. Sometimes it happens that one or more extra bones are formed on the back of the skull due to the formation of sutures. Their existence was first observed by anthropologists in South America. They saw it was very common on the Indians and Inca mummies, but it occurs everywhere in the world. Now here is a picture of the backside of a Paracas skull with an Inca bone. There is a real chance that this bone appeared so often among the Incas because they mixed with these big-headed people. If I am right, then there is a real possibility that this elongated skull is natural in its shape, meaning that this elongated-headed human species were once present in the Carpathian Basin, until they were mixed out of existence or were exterminated. Here I would like to note that according to a Hungarian medieval chronicle, Hungarians originate from the Crimean Peninsula and the northern coast of the Black Sea. exactly where Brian Forster placed the origin of this large-headed race. In light of this information, I recommend watching or re-watching my video titled Gog Magog and the Giant of Kandahar for those who would like to have their minds blown. There is another connection with the Carpathian Basin, more specifically the Hungarians living there and the Paracas culture and Peru, namely skull trepanation, as this custom was widespread amongst 10th century Hungarians as well as pre-Incan cultures, and even with the Incas themselves. It wouldn't surprise me if both the Hungarians and the Incas adopted this practice from the big-headed race. I do not know how this people that once lived in the region of Peru is related to the species I call medium tridactyls, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Maria came from the same region where the Paracas skulls are from. Let's go back to the Nazca mummies and continue with the creatures that I call Small-trydactils. You can see x-rays of them on the screen right now. This species is completely different from anything that academic science studied before. The structure and function of their joints, especially those of the elbows, are different from everything we've encountered before. The same could be said about the location and the shape of their ribs. Their bones are hollow, including their vertebrae, similar to birds. On the x-rays of the creature named Josephina, we can see two anomalies. The first one is this implant at the chest, which looks like an infinity sign. The second is that if we look at Josephina's belly, it bulges as if she were pregnant. The x-ray shows the presence of 3 oval objects in the lower abdominal cavity of the creature. The topography shows that Josephina's collarbone was broken at some point, which is why many people suggested that the implant had a medical purpose. I will explain later why I don't think that's the case. What is interesting about this implant, aside from its existence, is that in 2021, a sample was taken from it at St. Aloysius Gonzaga National University in Inca, and traces of osmium were detected in the implant. Osmium is one of the rarest metals in the world. It is refined from platinum and other precious metals. The annual production of this material is around a few tons. The element itself was only discovered by us in the early 1800s. I would also like to note that one of the current uses of osmium is in medical implants, and it looks like the tridactyls also use this metal for similar purposes. Now let's take a look at the other anomaly. They were able to look inside these oval-shaped objects with computer topography, and inside it you can see an embryo. In other words, these are fertilized eggs. I mentioned earlier that there will be other clues that indicate that the Small-trydactils are reptiles, or at least something close to them. If you look at the back of the headless mummy named Victoria, there is a part where the diatomaceous earth has almost completely worn away, and skin is clearly visible, and it looks like it has scales. The following video was uploaded to YouTube on April 14th, 2011, showing 2 Russian teenagers filming a mutilated body resembling a Small-trydactyl that they found in the snow. If anyone wants to know what they are talking about, one of the guys says that the dog sniffed out the body 2 hours ago, and that it could have been there for about a week. The rest is just swear words. I don't know if the video is real, and I don't care that some skeptic has probably already debunked it. I brought the video up because the corpse in it is eerily similar to the mummies of the Small-trydactils in several ways. First of all, there are the obvious things like the size of the creature, the colour, the shape of the skull, the location of the eyes, and the proportions of the limbs. But in addition to these, there are smaller details, like these depressions on the face. We can see similar depressions on the topography scans on the Small-trydactils. And then there's the fact that the creature's lower abdomen is bulging exactly like Josephina's, as if she were pregnant. Finally, there are these 2 small bumps on the creature's chest. The video quality isn't the best, so I don't know how visible they are, but the shape and location of these are very similar to Josefina's infinity-shaped chest implant. If the video is real, it suggests to me that Josefina's implant was not intended to heal a broken collarbone. I'll link the video in the description if anyone wants to watch it. Let's follow with the results of the carbon dating and DNA tests that were made based on samples obtained from the headless small-trydactyl named Victoria. Carbon dating was performed at a Brazilian and a Mexican university. The Mexican one found that Victoria died 791 years ago, while the Brazilian one dated this event to 1040 years ago. Samples were taken from Victoria's neck and hip for DNA testing, and both were sent to two Mexican universities. The first one found that 36% of the extracted DNA sequences from the neck were human, while in the case of the hip, this number was 29%. For the second one, this number was 14% for the neck and 15% for the hip sample. As for the samples taken from the species I called large-trydactils, more precisely their hands, depending on whether the sample came from the skin or the bones, the carbon dating results were very different. The samples taken from the bones were dated between 1205 years and 1080 years old by two different laboratories, while the skin was 6,420 years and 7,270 years old, respectively. The big differences may be explained by the fact that during mummification the skin was coated with chemical substances which may have changed the amount of carbon-14 isotopes in the skin, which is used for radiocarbon dating. As for the DNA tests carried out in three different laboratories, according to one, 20% of the extracted DNA sequences contained human DNA. According to the second, this number was 98%, and according to the third, 100%. They also took samples of the implants found on the hands. The circular ones are made of an alloy of copper, silver, and gold, but these ring-like piercings, which are found embedded into the broken hand in the possession of Paul Ronceros, are mostly made of iron, chromium, and nickel. These metals were not available to the Incas or the Andean civilizations that preceded them. One last piece of information about the hands. No full body that belongs to this species has been found yet, or at least the public was not informed about it. If we assume that the hands are proportional to the rest of the body, as it is with us humans, then the representatives of this species could have reached 3 meters or 10 feet in height. The Gaia and Inskari Institute held their first press conference on their research in 2017. On November 18, 2018, thanks to the Peruvian Congressman Armando Villanueva Mercado, the scientists and researchers who had the opportunity to examine the mummies were given the chance to present their results in the Peruvian Congress. Everyone who actually had seen the mummies in person stated at this congressional hearing that the mummies were clearly living beings at one point, and that they were so complex that any kind of forgery could be ruled out. Several professional archaeologists working for the state institutions were also present at the hearing and were able to speak after the researchers' presentations. But none of them supported that the government should take part in the research. Armando said at the hearing that he had previously spoken with the Peruvian Minister of Culture and that the representatives from the ministry were also going to attend the hearing, but they backed out at the last minute. After the hearing, the Peruvian government did not give a statement or even a comment about the hearing. It did not seem like they had any interest in the mummies, but there was an institution which did. After the conference, the leaders of the St. Aloysius Gonzaga University contacted the Inskari Institute and told them they wanted to study the mummies. In the end, Jaime and his team managed to convince Mario to hand over some of the bodies in his possession to the university. This is how 4 mummies, namely Maria, Wawita, Albert and Victoria, arrived at the University of Ica on August 1, 2019. On October 25, 2019, employees of the Peruvian Ministry of Culture, accompanied by police, appeared at the university campus and demanded that the university leaders hand over the mummies to them. But they had no legal basis for this, since it would first have to be approved by the Peruvian Congress, which did not happen, so they were unsuccessful. 3 days later, on October 28th, they tried again, using similar methods with similar results. Because of this, 1 month later, on November 6th, the university held a press conference where they admitted they had 4 alien mummies in their possession. They also offered the opportunity to members of the international science community to come to Peru and study the remains. They did this because they wanted to discourage the Ministry of Culture from making a similar attempt in the future. This strategy, however, was unsuccessful in this regard. In the following years, the Ministry of Culture tried multiple times to seize the mummies, also without success. And now we get to the point where we started this video, because in September 12, 2023, Mexican journalist Jaime Maussan presented the mummified remains of 2 small-trydactils to the Mexican Congrass. This news was reported worldwide. It is not entirely clear how these 2 mummies got out of Peru, because the export of archaeological artifacts found in Peru is illegal. If I had to guess, I would say that Jaime Maussan, or someone through him, bought these 2 bodies from Mario and then smuggled them out of the country. The day after the congressional presentation, on September 13th, Mexican scientists began examining the mummies, as part of which the following live stream was uploaded to YouTube on the 19th, where they were performing CT scans on the bodies. The results of these tests were presented to the Mexican Congress on November 7th, and the scientists who did the tests agreed that the mummies were real and had not been tampered with. The last news I heard about the mummies on display in Mexico was that one of them had had his hand rehydrated for autopsy purposes. I assume they were interested in the implant embedded into the hand. Now, back to Peru. Terry Jamin already notified the Peruvian Ministry of Culture about the alien remains back in 2016, when he first encountered them. The ministry did not even bother to respond to him, and they ignored the case until a few mummies ended up at the University of Ica, after which they tried several times to seize them. To me, it seems that the Ministry of Culture would have preferred to keep the matter under the rug for some reason. The researchers held a press conference in Lima on April 4th, 2024, where they planned to present research results about some new corpses which had been found since then. In the middle of the conference, employees of the Peruvian Ministry of Culture showed up, accompanied by police officers, to confiscate these new mummies, but the bodies themselves were not present. By the way, these scenes were broadcasted live on YouTube. I won't even ask the question if these mummies are really fakes made of papier-mâché, glue and animal bones, as the skeptics say. For then, why would the Peruvian Ministry of Culture go to such lengths to acquire them? It seems that something had changed because on September 3rd, 2024, the Peruvian Minister of Culture, Leslie Ulteaga Penay, was replaced by Fabrico Alfredo Valencia Gibaya. After this, the Ministry of Culture, with the help of an independent team, had the mummies at the University of Ica examined on September 13th. Members of the team reported in a video interview that they found nothing on Mary's hands and feet that would indicate manipulation. On November 10th, 2024, the Peruvian Congress held another hearing on the matter. The latest news I've heard is that the Peruvian government wants to build a separate museum for these mummies. So who knows, maybe these artifacts won't be quietly hidden away and potentially destroyed, like so many other things that don't fit into the mainstream academic worldview. There might be more info about them since then, but most of the newer information is only available in Spanish, which I don't speak. Despite everything I told so far, If you Google the phrase Nazca alien mummies, the first article that will likely come up will be this one with the title "Scientists assert alien mummies in Peru are really dolls made from earthly bones." And if you search for the same thing on YouTube, the first video that likely pops up will have the title "Peru alien mummies confirmed to be fake." These articles and news reports are clearly made for people who purely base their opinion about anything on clickbait titles and never look into it themselves. Because if you actually research the topic, it will be obvious that these reports are trying to deceive you. The story is the following. In January 2024, before the Minister of Culture was replaced in Peru, someone mailed these two bone dolls made by a local artist from Palpa in Peru to Mexico. They were seized at the border, and state employees working for a medical institute examined them and stated that these are just dolls. These dolls have nothing to do with the mummies that were presented in the Mexican Congrass in 2023, or the other ones I've been talking about in the video so far. Just look at their X-ray. It is clear that these are not the same. To me, it's pretty obvious that the whole thing was a pre-planned, staged operation by people within the Peruvian government, and their goal was to mislead people about the mummies that became known across the globe after the congressional hearing in Mexico, which happened a few months prior. And as far as I can see, they succeeded. Let me ask the question. If the mummies really are fake, then why did they decide to pull such a farce to discredit them? I wanted to do a segment where I would have listed the skeptical arguments about the topic, but I have not heard from anyone who personally had the chance to examine the mummies and was on the opinion afterwards that they are fake. I've also never seen a skeptic who managed to produce a mummy that was even half as convincing as the ones found in Peru, even though they claim that Mario and his team of grave robbers managed to fake at least a dozen of them. I have also rarely encountered a skeptic who was even remotely aware of the details of the story. Therefore, I can't really take the skeptic position on the subject very seriously. Even more mummies were discovered after 2018. Most of the material available about them online is in Spanish, and in many cases the research is still in its infancy. But here's what I found nonetheless. Let's start with the medium tridactyls first. The mummy in the picture was named Fernando. As far as I know, it was found in a private collection in Peru, whose owner died a few years ago. There is a golden disc-shaped implant in the middle of his forehead, and according to reports, the remains of a penis can be seen near his groin. What I'm trying to say with this is that he was a man. The next mummy you see in the picture was named Paloma. She is the most human-looking of the medium tridactyls. Her head shape is much closer to ours, and she has hair, unlike the others, which is apparently reddish-brown. On top of that, there seems to be remnants of ears next to her ear canal, which the others do not have. Is it possible that Paloma was born from a union of a Homo sapien and a medium tridactyl? According to tests, Paloma was an older woman. A greenish metal implant can be seen in her jaw. And finally, here are some pictures from her CT scans, which were presented in YouTube Live, so the quality is what it is. The specimen in the picture here is called Antonio, smaller than the previous ones. Perhaps a child. Only a few pictures of him are available. All that can be said about him is that his mouth is open, so researchers had the opportunity to look inside, and there are traces of dental procedures visible on his teeth, according to them. The mummy on the screen was named Earl. It is also a smaller specimen. He was discovered in 2023. His X-rays and topography are available on the Alien Project website. The mummy in this picture, or rather the one in the video, was named Sebastian, and was found in 2023 somewhere in Peru. He is also a smaller specimen. There is some high-resolution and quality video available about him and the mummy named Santiago on the internet. I will link the videos in the description if anyone wants to download them. Sebastian has 3 implants, 2 circular-shaped ones near each of his collarbones, and a fairly large rectangular bent plate on the back of his neck. There is some kind of inscription visible on this plate. By the way, I only noticed this with this mummy that although this species is apparently hairless, they do have eyelashes. The corpse on this video was named Santiago. Like Sebastian, he is a smaller specimen and was found in Peru in 2023. He is also the medium tridactyl on the thumbnail for this video. The last, or rather the penultimate medium tridactyl mummy that we will take a look at was named Montserrat. She was found by Mario sometime in early 2024. Montserrat has at least 10 metallic implants in her body. The most notable one is this gold-coloured plate in the middle of her forehead, which looks like Fernando's. You can see the location of the rest on the screen. During the tests, it was revealed that Montserrat was pregnant at the time of her death, as X-rays and CT scans shows a fetus in her lower abdominal cavity, which was later named Raphael. In addition, at least one small-trydactyl mummy has been discovered since 2018, which was named Artemis. You can see some pictures of her on the screen right now. This specimen has 7 implants. Since it is not easy to make them out in the pictures, I have illustrated their positions instead. Artemis's implants are located in the following places, from top to bottom. On the top of the head, at the bottom of the throat, at the junction of the right collarbone and neck. The next 3 are located vertically below each other on the front of the body in the middle. And the last one is located at the back, near the tailbone. What struck me about the locations of these implants, with one exception, matches the locations of the human chakra points. For those that don't know what a chakra is, in various esoteric schools, the major central points of the human energetic systems are named chakras. The location of these, from top to bottom, is the following: the root chakra, which is located at the tailbone, the sacral chakra, which is between the navel and the genitals, the solar plexus chakra, which is located at the stomach, the heart chakra, which is slightly above the heart, the throat chakra, which is obviously at the throat, the third eye, which is located in the middle of the forehead, and finally the crown chakra, which is located at the top of the head. With the exception of the third eye, Artemis has an implant above each chakra point, and I do not think it is simply a coincidence. And I also do not think it's a coincidence that both Fernando and Montserrat have a gold plate implanted above their third eyes. I would also like to note that Artemis has eggs in her abdomen, just like Josefina. Since 2018, 2 mummies have been discovered that belongs to a new species. These were named Nukari and Soyas. So you can see Nukari in the screen now. They look very strange because they do not have ribs. This may be because this species breathes without lungs, like some salamander species. Nukari is about half a metre tall, probably female because the X-ray revealed 2 eggs in the abdomen and at least 10 metallic implants. 2 short, wing-like protrusions can be seen on the creature's back. An interesting coincidence in this regard is The Paranormal Experience, a Brazilian YouTube channel which hosted an interview on October 18th, 2023, where 2 shamans from an Amazonian tribe were invited on as guests. The hosts asked them if they understood the word alien in Brazilian. They did not. However, When showing them pictures of so-called grey aliens and asked them if they recognised them, the shamans answered yes, and then said that these are ant-like creatures that live underground, and you have to be careful with them because they are dangerous. Well, coincidentally, the species that Nukari and Soyas belong to is quite insect-like, or I could even say ant-like in its appearance. These would be the newer mummies in the story. There were also some additional alien-like bodies found in Peru before the discovery of the Nazca mummies. For example, this small creature named Eta, similar to which was recently found in Mexico, which was named Adam. There is an X-ray of the latter, or the strange skull found in Mexico named Starchild. Similar skulls have also been found in Peru very recently, but I won't go into details about those right now. So what conclusions can we draw from the existence of these corpses? First of all, that multiple intelligent non-human but humanoid species which in some way are related to each other have been burying their dead somewhere in Peru for a very long time. These beings, if carbon dating is to be believed, have been here with us on Earth for thousands of years, and it seems that their technological advancements far exceeds ours. We can conclude this from their implants and the fact that they seem to have had access to materials for thousands of years that we humans have only discovered in the last 2 centuries. So where do these mummies even come from? Mario gave at least 2 different answers to this question. When he first met Jaime, he told him that in 2015 he had found an ancient stone door in the deserts of Peru that led to an underground necropolis. But later, after the authorities opened an investigation against him because they suspected that Mario had disturbed archaeological sites, he took Jaime and his team and the Gaia crew to the alleged site, which was a small rock cave in the nearby mountains. You can see pictures of this cave on the screen right now. Mario said that the necropolis was just a cover story to keep the original site hidden, and that all the mummies were found there in the cave. The site was covered in diatomaceous earth, which somewhat supports Mario's claim that the mummies were found there, but there are also counter-arguments. For example, the cave is not very large. It would have had to be packed quite tightly to fit all the mummies. Then there's the timeline. Mario constantly kept coming up with new bodies over the months. Jaime said that when Mario showed them another new body, he could see on the thickness of the soil covering it, it had been recently removed from the site. The problem with this is that removing everything from this cave could take 2 days at most, not a year, and if all the mummies really came from the cave, where did Mario get the mummies that he finds years later after showing them this cave? Jaime notes in the Trydactils documentary film that he saw other similar caves near the site when Mario led them there. Would it be possible that this species buries its dead in the caves of the Nazca Desert Mountains? In my opinion, it is not unthinkable, but unlikely that this site is the burial place. Let's assume for a few minutes that what Mario first said to Jaime, that the bodies came from an underground necropolis, is the truth, and the rock cave was the diversion. Now, Mario told Jaime that the mummified body of an ancient Peruvian noble was found near the entrance of the necropolis, which suggests that there was some kind of connection between the Trydactils and the people living around Nazca in the past. I would like to note here that countless ancient Inca objects and petroglyphs show the image of a creature with 3 long fingers and toes, which may support the existence of this ancient connection. Mario also said to Jaime that in the necropolis there are several tunnels. He doesn't know how long or deep the passages go, and that the Nazca mummies were found there in stone coffins and in cavities in the walls. If he is to be believed, then the site is inhabited, because Mario mentioned back in 2017 that he and his team had seen Small-trydactils multiple times deep inside the passages. At this point, let's take a detour to Janos Morix and the Metal Library. For those who haven't seen my video on the subject, here's a very short summary. Janos Morix was a Hungarian man who emigrated to Ecuador in the 1960s, where he was investigating old abandoned Inca gold mines to see if reopening them was profitable or not. In 1969, Morix went public with the story that during fieldwork, local natives had led him to an ancient room deep inside the Taos cave, where there were books made of huge gilded metal plates on stone shelves. Morix wanted the discovery to be confirmed, but in the end things did not work out. In 1981, a group of Hungarian hikers travelled to Ecuador to climb the 6,267 metre high Chimborazo Peak. During their stay in Guayaquil, the team was hosted by Janos Morix, who, according to Zeli Richards' book Message from the Gods, told them that when members of the Shuar tribe took him down to the Metal Library, he met alien beings deep inside the cave system. Zoltán Varga, president of the Janos Morix Association, said that when he was in South America, he met a man there who claimed to have been in an underground city deep inside the Andes, and even showed Zoltán photographs of it. If this is true, then the question arises as to who did the city belong to. In the 2017 film Taos, a man named Manuel Palacios talks about when he was down in the cave. He had a strange experience. When they were about to leave, a sequence of images popped into his head, according to which one night down in the cave, a couple of young, naked, very pale-skinned people came to his tent, including a woman who told him that they lived here deep in the caves. Then she showed him a gold wire-like implant in her tailbone and told him that because of this they could stay alive for a very long time, and then left. Mario told Jaime a similar story, according to which when he was down in the tunnel once, he saw a blue-skinned woman. When she noticed him, she shooed him away with her hand before disappearing into the tunnels. I don't know how true these stories are, but considering that these creatures bury their dead here on this planet, it indicates that they also live here. In addition, many people around the world see creatures similar to the alien mummies of Peru. For example, the following photo was taken in 2017 by a police officer in the Argentinian city of Ciudad de Corrientes. That night they were called to a local park because they received reports that a naked figure was hiding in the bushes. According to press articles published about the incident, after the police arrived, they found the naked man who turned out to be an alien. After they shone their flashlight onto it, the creature jumped into a nearby river and swam away. What I would like to note about this photo is that the creature on it appears to have 3 fingers, just like the Trydactils. Based on the information available to us, it seems that the species that the Nazca mummies belong to exist here with us on Earth. In my opinion, it would be logical to assume that there is a kind of underground world deep within the Andes, and perhaps in other mountains, where these creatures live their day-to-day lives. There were a couple of very poor quality videos uploaded to YouTube in 2017. In these you can see armed Huaqeeros or perhaps gang members inside tunnels or underground structures, and in some places alien beings and their corpses appear, which look very similar to the mummies that have been found in Peru. The video implies that these corpses were killed by Huaqeeros. Among the comments, several people wrote that the original recordings were shown by a Mexican TV channel in 2005, which can be supported by the fact that the videos were apparently recorded with a handheld camera from a TV screen. Some of the footage looks very convincing, while some of it not so much. If I had to guess, I would say these are from a feature film, but if not, and criminals made it down to this underground world somewhere in South America in the 2000s and got into a fight with the locals, Well, I think that's something worth mentioning. Anyway, I'll link a couple of the compilations of these videos in the description. There's an interesting coincidence, namely that the creatures I call little Tridactyls show reptilian features, and it looks like at least some of them live underground. In Asia, there is a mythical creature which they call a Naga. The Nagas are a half-human, half-snake, semi-divine race who live underground. Is it possible that these Nagas are actually the same as the creatures I call the Small-trydactils? By the way, there are several ancient myths across the globe where one or more snake, dragon, or snake people appear, and it might be worth rethinking the meaning of these myths in relation to the discovery of the alien mummies. A good example of this would be the story of Adam and Eve. If you don't know, originally, in paradise, snakes still had hands and feet, which God later took from them as punishment, because the devil used the shape of a snake for tricking Eve into eating from the tree of knowledge. So to sum it up, in the last few years in Peru, several mummies of non-human but humanoid beings have been discovered. The available information indicates that these beings live underground in the depths of the Andes Mountains and are technologically much more advanced than we are. Some of these species look exactly like some of the aliens reported in alien abductions. In light of this, I think these abduction reports should be taken very seriously. Furthermore, it seems very likely that in the distant past there was an open connection between humanity and the inhabitants of this underground world. This raises a few questions. First of all, what is our common history? For what purpose do they abduct countless people around the world? Why do the governments of the world try to keep their existence a secret? How many of them are there? Are they present on other planets as well? Who was here first, them or us? I could go on and on. Towards the end of the video, I'd like to tell you what Mario told Jaime when he and his companions were down in the necropolis. They had the brilliant idea of trying to catch a Small-trydactyl alive. To do this, they set up an ambush with slingshots in one of the tunnels, then attacked two beings who were passing by. Two Huaqeeros managed to hit them with their projectiles, but the Tridactyls got away. Shortly after this, one of them lost his mind and started eating salt until he died. The other one got very sick and died a few weeks later. If this story is true, it implies to me that these creatures deliberately let Mario and his team take a few mummies from the necropolis. The question is, why? Maybe the corpses are not that important to them to risk a conflict with the invaders, or maybe the whole thing is part of some kind of plan on their part. That would be it for today's video. A significant part of the information presented here comes from the website of the Inskari Institute called The Alien Project. The documentary films The Tridactyls and Unearthing Nazca, The Complete Story, from the books written by Terry Chemin and Konstantin Krotakov on the subject, and the Alien Bodies subreddit, from where I would like to highlight the user Dragonfruit, who does a pretty good job posting the news which appear in Latin American sources to an international English audience. This script was written in the December of 2024, so there may be some newer development which I did not cover for this reason. That's it for this video. Goodbye and thanks for watching.